It's like that. Why is it like that? 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 Why is it like Why? 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 How? How? Yeah, okay. I think now I have some. I don't know if you can hear me. My microphone is from the earphones. So if you can hear me now, well and good. If you can hear me now, well and good. If you can hear me now, well and good. If you can hear me now, well and good. If you can hear me now, well and good. If you can hear me now, well and good. If you can hear me now, well and good. Well and good. Well and good. If you can hear me now, well and good. If you can hear me now, well and good. If you can hear me now, well and good. If you can hear me now, well and good. Well and good. Well and good. If you can hear me now, well and good. If you can hear me now, well and good. If you can hear me now, well and good. If you can hear me now, well and good. If you can hear me now, well and good. If you can hear me now, well and good. If you can hear me now. We now come to the pure, natural, winsome forms of wealth. Among these are nature's works of and they are like, namely, they constitute wealth when they produce wealth. It is necessary that the creative element of mind enter into alchemical crucible. Before that, these attractions can be transmuted into gold. These nature beauties and wonders must be rendered accessible to the public by means of railroads, navigable ways, waterways, trolleys, or automobile roads before an economic benefit can accrue. Prior to the days of rapid transportation and economic benefits derived from these forms of nature. Natural wealth were inconsiderable. By the present time, hundreds of millions are expended by tourists in viewing them. Ernest A. Mills, writing in the Study Evening Post, says last year Europe did a travel business of $500 million, 350 millions of these were spent by Americans. America's scenic resources far superior to those of Europe, such in the varied and striking nature of our scenery, and such is the nature of the traveler that we have. But to exploit these resources and add accessibility and entertainment to them, to have a more productive travel industry than that of Europe, Switzerland is an excellent illustration in this connection. It had an array of scenery. The scenery was made pleasantly accessible by means of good roads. The traveler came. He was graciously received and comfortably entertained. The following year he returned accompanied by a number of friends. Thus, in a few years, Switzerland, with an area of only 15,000 square miles, by exploiting its scenery, built up a travel industry that brings it $200 million annually. In the nature of things, the United States should have a travel industry of vast economic importance, We have numerous and extensive scenic areas of an excellent attractiveness, together with a majority of the world's greatest scenic wonders and wonderlands. All these to respond in a climate that is hospitable and refreshing. Our established scenic reservations, all those which may hereafter be set aside and are destined to become the basis of our large scenic industry. These reservations embrace the 15 national parks and 28 national monuments. Writers give a list of these reservations and then continues. Here is a splendid array of nature's masterpieces to lure and reward the traveler. In mountain peaks, there are Grand Teton, Long Peaks, Mount Weston, and Mount Rainier. In Columns, the vast Grand Canyon and the brilliantly colored Yellowstone. In gorgeous that peerless pair, the housemaid and the hedge in trees, the unrevealed squirrels, and many matchless primordial forests. In rivers, few on earth are enriched with scenes equal to those between which rolls the Columbia. In petrified forests, those in Arizona, Yellowstone, and Yosemite. In glaciers, the Blackfoot, Hinosqually, and the Parapole. In medicinal springs, there's an array of flowing life extending fountains. In wild flowers, the mountain wild flowers of the west. I love it. In wild animals of interest, the grizzly bear, the beaver, and the mountain sheep. In bird music, that which is sung by the thrushes and canyons, warrens silences with melodious sweetness, the other beast songbirds of earth. In these varied attractions of our natural parks, we have ample playgrounds for all the world and the opportunity for a travel industry many times as productive as our gold and silver mines, and more lasting too than they. The president of the Bank of Japan, K. Takahashi, is quoted by Clement in his handbook of modern Japan as saying, Japan is especially favored by nature with beauty and picture squareness of scenery and healthful climate, and has appropriately been called the paradise of the East. We will turn this country into a grand park of nations and draw pleasure seekers from all parts of the world. We shall build magnificent hotels and establish excellent clubs in most splendid style to receive the royal visitors of Europe and the millionaires of Africa. The author adds, and while other objection has been raised that this is not a very lofty role for Japan, it is claimed that it seemed to be about the role that France, the great nation of artists, is content to play in Europe, making herself infinitely beautiful and infinitely charming. In a view of the fact that other nations are recognizing the economic value of national forms of wealth, it behoves the United States to turn her attention to this vast mine of virtuous wealth in order that she may not be left at a post. by revival countries. Distribution or opportunity. Distribution or opportunity. Do I have somebody here? Do I have? I come here to check if I have somebody here. Okay, there's somebody here. I feel like I need to get a drink. Need to get a drink. I need to get a drink, man. Getting a drink, that's what I feel like. I feel like. Okay, I need to get a drink. Okay, something to drink which is not water. I've been drinking water, but I don't know. It's when I feel like I need something which is not water. Like I'm going to waste money. You want to waste money? I don't want to waste money anymore. Sorry. I don't know. I don't feel good at all. I don't feel good. Even if I go and buy it, I'm not going to be feeling good. I just want to feel good. Oh my god. What can I do? To set this alarm. Set this alarm. Need to set the alarm. Yeah. What can I do for real? Always around today. Feel like really I need something to drink. And whenever I need something, I want to get it. I'll get chapati and soda. I don't like soda. But sometimes I just want to drink. Yeah. Okay, I felt like I needed a drink or something because I didn't know what was wrong with me. I didn't feel good. Distribution or opportunity. Much has been written in recent years concerning the unequal distribution of wealth, and to remedy this supposed inequality, all sorts of panaceas have been prescribed, ranging from rank classification to slow methods of extirpation by cumulative taxation process. This agitation has progressed so far as to involve the seats of the mighty. Only a mighty. It is not necessary to mention names, as all can recall notable recent instances of more or less irresponsible ebullition. In the consideration of this question, 2 or 3 fundamental propositions generally overlooked will be discussed. The first proposition pertains to the thesis of the treatise, the creative aspect of wealth. The second proposition has reference to the necessity that capitalists make use of their surplus wealth, and that is, in making use of it, they necessarily create opportunities for labor. The third proposition grows out of the first two, namely, opportunity is preferable to charity. In the discussion of economic questions, the word opportunity should displace distribution. All can agree on the proposition that to labor is man's most treasured boon, and it logically follows that anything which affords him such an opportunity is of more worth than the distribution of so-called surplus wealth. For example, it is better that the entrepreneur devotes their non-working capital to new projects than to divide it among those who may possess more of this world's goods than others. It is also plain that the more opportunities offered, the greater will be the demand for labor, and following the law of supply and demand, wages will thereby be enhanced. The process of distribution is as if the farmer should go into the orchard and pluck the green fruit for distribution among those who have less, or if the gardener should pick the flowers in the bud for the same purpose. Perhaps the analogy would be more complete if the farmer or planter should dig up his fruit trees, say orange, and give them to residents of a northern clime, or as if the florist should take his flowers out of the hothouse in midwinter and bestow them upon those who desire to plant them in their gardens. In these cases, as in the distribution of wealth, are found dispensable dispersion and destruction of intelligent concentration of productive capital. That capital is required in the conduct of industrial enterprises can not be denied. Neither can it be denied that in general the capital is in the hands of the doers of the world. It is not to be inferred that this capital is always possessed by the doers or captains of industry. There are some idle capitalists, but this need not concern any of, as long as their money is working. These capitalists are continually looking for new places for investment, for new projects to promote, and to accomplish these purposes, the capital is placed in the hands of the creative forces, the entrepreneurs of the economic world. The tendency has recently developed in magazine and newspaper writers of wide reputation to advocate the confiscation of property of the idle rich. This propaganda is as fallacious as that of the socialists who would confiscate all property. All should rejoice in the wealth of the wealthy if acquired honestly, for they cannot eat it and they will not literally burn it. Therefore, they must spend it or invest it, and in so doing provide sustenance and opportunities for labor to the less fortunate. Then again, the more benevolently inclined of these capitalists are in the habit of donating large sums of philanthropies of various kinds, educational, religious, charitable, and general social service. If their wealth is taken away from them, who will contribute to these benevolent causes? It is axiomatic that the more complex the civilization, the greater the opportunities for laborer. Such opportunities, for example, in distinctively agricultural community are very limited. If only the necessities of life are produced, economic activities are placed on a level with those of such countries as China or the South Sea Islands. But some may ask, why should we desire our labor for more than the necessaries of life? Wherefore, all this struggle for the non-utilities, the artistic and hedonistic, the dramatic and beautiful, well, does such anyone presume to criticize Mother Nature? Does she not revel in these things, and is she not the inspiration of all arts? There is another argument in these latter days equally as possible for the dynamic forces of wealth. We refer to the introduction of labor-saving machinery and other efficient devices in agriculture and in the manufacturers. The installation of these machinery and of these land augmenting processes in agriculture creates a condition differing only in degree to the southern claim referred to under capital, where but little labor is required to sustain life. In each case, the actual labor involved as compared with the results is insignificant, and it can readily be seen that economic conditions gradually tend toward the minimizing of physical labor, which with a correlative augmentation of labor, mental labor, and of this forms a potent and all of this forms a potent reason why economists should modify the teachings in their textbook. Seligman. Seligman, in his Principles of Economics, makes the statement: the apologists for luxury, for example, have from time immemorial thought to justify themselves by the plea that luxurious expenditure is beneficial because it affords employment to labor. The merest tyro in economic reasoning, however, will at once perceive the weakness of the orally argument. If luxurious expenditure is productive simply because it employs labor, the accidental breaking of a window pane of the wanton destruction of a growing crop is also productive insofar as it will require labor to repair the damage. The fallacy clearly consists in the assumption that wealth spent in luxurious outlay would not otherwise be devoted to production. Obviously, however, if the spendthrift chooses not to waste his funds, they will take the form of purchase of securities in investment in some enterprise or of a cash balance in bank. And each case they will be devoted to production and thus give employment to labor, weaving the writer's inability to distinguish between the so-called luxuries and destruction. He's begging the question when he assumes that surplus money will be invested in some productive enterprise. It must be hoarded up. Then he would have to be very careful what kind of an enterprise he invested his money in, for nearly all such are devoted to the manufacture of some of the forms of the so-called luxuries. Even textile houses make all kinds of gaudy and artistic stuff on which the orthodox economist would place a ban. The unanswerable reply to the argument is that civilization is made up of a proposition of these luxuries, the dynamic forms of wealth. It is impossible to differentiate between the various forms of luxuries except in a manner hereafter explained. In an answer to the argument relative to the broken window and damaged crops, it is sufficient to state that both are productive forces if they result in a more equitable distribution of wealth, affording employment to those who have less. If the owner of the house with the broken window is a man of wealth, surely it harms no one, but on the contrary benefits the glass manufacturer and his employees. Windows are fragile, and their ultimate destruction is as certain as that an orange will be consumed by man and animal other elements. Another argument in favor of the destruction of property is that insurance companies are founded upon such destructions, yet they have been one of the most productive forces of a nation. The comparatively small amounts collected from those insured have become millions in the hands of those insurance companies, which have been loaned to the captains of industry and in that manner have aided and encouraged the development of the resources of a country. It is therefore apparent that a loss to an individual does not necessarily signify a loss to the nation as a whole. Economic exceptions in the so-called luxuries already referred to compromise those hedonistic, deleterious practices and pursuits which generally result in the deterioration of man, mentally and physically, plus with these other manufacture, sale, and use of intoxicants, opium, cigarettes, and other harmful commodities which destroy the economic as well as the physical and moral worth of the individual. While it is true that all of these things at first hand have an economic value, yet their ultimate effect is so detrimental and destructive that the economic strength of a nation becomes sapped. Who can estimate the loss of a nation? For an example, should such a creative man as Edison have fallen a victim to one or more of these blights? If in the economic world, however, wealth is the satisfaction of a desire subjectively, or money or its equivalent objectively, the question of benefits in a business transaction cannot be logically considered, no matter if the commodity or thing purchased be as good or better than represented. Natural economic law may intervene to render it valueless or worse. For instance, food may be purchased of the rarest and best quality, but if the purchaser eats too much or partakes of something he should not have eaten, he will not only derive no benefits therefrom, but on the contrary may become ill and suffer loss in time, money, and peace of mind. Again, if property or a commercial building is purchased and a panic issues, the purchase may be rendered worthless. A horse may be bought and the deal may be fair and just, but the animal may immediately suffer an accident, and it follows that only thing that matters is whether misrepresentations have been made by one party or the other of a transaction. The purchaser may derive no benefits from a trade, and it may have been plain to an impartial observer that he could not possibly have derived any benefits, but if the thing purchased is something which he desired, there can be no economic fraud. It is evident, however, that the money received by the seller is of as much value to him as if the thing sold was of real worth to the purchaser. In short, a one-sided transaction, as in the case of the broken window, may be of great benefit. The only thing to be considered is whether a great economic boon would have resulted had there been no destruction of property. It is readily conceivable how the destruction of old time-worn or unprofitable buildings by fire, cyclones, or earthquakes may result in economic benefit. In such cases where unsightly and unenumerative buildings are destroyed, while there may be nominal loss, yet if out of the ashes arise new and more attractive edifices, it will be admitted that the final result is an economic boon. Such was the result in the great historic fires of the country in Chicago and Baltimore, and in the this disastrous earthquake and fire that visited San Francisco. Paradoxical as it may seem, there is a sort of destruction that is in reality conservation. If, for example, a building or a number of buildings are destroyed by an earthquake, and if out of the ruins spring better and stronger buildings, more of concrete and steel, what happens? There is a conservation by conversion to other and indispensable uses of wood and other weak and destructible materials of the original constructions, and there is conservation of forests which will be preserved for essential manufactures and practical uses. In olden times, poplar, oak, hickory, and even walnut timber was used for fuel and in the construction of fences and the like. If some natural catastrophe, a fire or a cyclone, destroyed larger quantities of standing timber, causing scarcity in one or more localities, it would have a tendency to check the wasteful use of such material in other localities. Harrington Emerson, in an address on the opportunity of labor under scientific management, as reported in a volume entitled Tax School Conference on Scientific Management, says, in the Seward Peninsula, Alaska, where many Eskimos, they had lived there many thousand years, they barely subsisted. There was no in wealth from generation to generation. There was no gain in population. Occasionally in severe seasons, all settlements were wiped out by starvation. Into this country came a Swedish deserter from a whaling ship. He found indications of gold. He staked some claims. The rush began. Miners received $10 per day. Gamblers, saloon keepers, and lewd women came in great numbers. There were in the elementary country 4 classes of society: the abnormally intelligent few who had uncovered hidden wealth, gold-bearing rock; the men who worked or contributed to the working of the claims, and abjectly poor class at the bottom, the Eskimos, and the predatory class of parasites. It can be that the poverty of the Eskimos was due to the wealth of the mine owners. Further along, Emerson says, before the days of the Norman conquest, there were unusually degraded people in London. The condition has steadily improved, never through their own efforts, but always through those of the enterprising few who went out to trade abroad or to build up manufactures at home or to open up new coal and iron mines. Gerard Stanley Lee, in Inspired Millionaires, says, the facts seem to be coming out all about us that the world is not only inventing new kinds of machines, but with the Copernicus, Darwin, Bell, Lord Kelvin, Rosacea, Columbus, Lincoln, Wordsworth, Whiteman, Emerson, Edison, and Mason. They're slowly inventing new kinds and sizes of men. There are several kinds of men with imagination. In business, those who invent trade conventions, conveniences, and economies, the creative merchants, brokers, storekeepers, those who invent machines and whose imaginations play in the roles of physics, those who invent new materials and whose imaginations play around the things that come out of the earth, the men who make new combinations of the elements, who are poets in chemistry or botany or mineralogy, those who invent people. The special function of the inspired millionaire as he looks over the field of invention is inventing people. People are the most necessary of the inventions they make and use. The others, nearly all of our great millionaires, were invented by some other millionaire who saw what was in them and saw how it could be combined and released and put in action. It would appear that the law of compensation as applied to economics is more than compensatory. People living in the 20th century are heirs to all the discoveries, inventions, and economic benefits produced by men of enterprise in the 19th and preceding centuries. If the second efficiency method, labor-saving devices, caused thousands to be thrown out of employment, it's only that they may be caught up by the creative forces. Efficient method number 1 and lifted to higher and better stations. Underwent some wealth, it was shown how the artists, authors, sculptors, architects, and a host of other mental workers find a wider and more remunerative field for their production as economic life begins more and more complex. So under expanded industrialism, greater opportunities are afforded to the class of men represented by managers and various kinds of experts, chemists, inventors, mechanicians, bookkeepers, clerks, engineers, foremen, chauffeurs, and so on to the end of the chapter, not forgetting the farmer. A writer in the Saturday Evening Post says, relative to wealth distribution, in the last 10 years we have had the most phenomenal prosperity ever known here or anywhere else, and we have followed the example of the children of Israel and kicked until not only have we almost convinced ourselves that we are suffering unusual hardships, but have caused the people of the old world to wonder if at last their predictions are not coming true, that the republic is about to crumble up under dissatisfaction and division. The writer states that he was told at the census office that our total wealth today is estimated at $150 billion. It was 88 billion in 1900. 65 billion in 1890 and only 16 billion in 1860. This total wealth has not been gathered into the hands of the money trust or tariff barons, nor has it been centered in Wall Street. It's just where wealth has always been, among the people who go to the soil, the mine, and the factory and produce wealth. The value of farms and farms property not only doubled in the last 10 years, but it has increased fivefold in the last 40 years. But this farm wealth was only $8 billion in 1870, and it's now almost as great as the total wealth of the country in 1880. All of these considerations are collaborative of our contention that the wealth of all classes is interwoven with the wealth of any particular class, or to state it in another way, creative men develop resources, discoveries, and inventions. To do this, they employ labor. To employ labor means to circulate money, and more money there is in circulation, the greater the opportunity to acquire some of it. Trustees and special privileges. And the discussion of trusts, which is a perennial theme. A popular practice prevails of placing them in two classes, the bad and the good, or the black and white, to be exact. However, this statement must be modified, for there are many who would place them all in the first named class, and these asseverate that following the characterization of Indian, a good trust is a dead trust. A good trust is a dead trust. Now we maintain that this letter have the thing reversed, and what they should say is a good trust is a live trust. A live trust is meant one which is alive in spirit and action, alive to the economic needs of a people, a country, and alive in visions and plans for their fulfillment. In brief, a good trust is one backed and forwarded by creative men who hold their positions by the force of efficiency rather than the non-force of dead mass. In the most popular conception, a bad trust is a big trust or a monopoly, one which controls the great part of the output of the products manufactured. Such a trust may or may not be bad, depending, of course, on whether it uses its power to maintain unfair prices or to unfairly restrain trade. But on the other hand, if it utilizes its power in developing the industrial and commercial life of a nation by the introduction of economies and methods of efficiency, it must be classed among the good trusts. It must be remembered, however, that a trust may become so large and unwieldy that it fails to be effective and falls of its own weight. Essentially, the only bad trust is one which results from throwing together or combining a lot of dead physical units without regard to service or efficiency, with the aim of controlling prices and restraining trade. This is the dead trust as distinguished from the live one. As regards monopolies and special privileges, it would prove interesting if some of these creators of these supposed evils would define the terms and then apply the definitions to their own individual cases. Who are the monopolists? The word monopolize is defined as meaning to obtain or assume exclusive possession or control of. In the light of this definition, and in view of the fact that two persons cannot occupy the same space or position at the same time, are not all of us who hold positions monopolists or beneficiaries of special privilege, if you please. So long as there are idle persons or more desirable positions than others, the less fortunate must look upon all persons holding positions or better position or possessing lands or industries monopolists. All farmers, tradesmen, professional men, and artists of various kinds are monopolists, as are all office holders, policemen, selectmen, mayors, sheriffs, governors, senators, and even the president. The latter only monopolizes the office for 4 or more years, but in some instances attempts to monopolize the functions of officials of other branches of the government. There is a certain former president who not only monopolized the office for 2 terms, but dictated his successor and then attempted to monopolize it again, and he needs watching yet. Thus, we see that there are monopolists, and again monopolists, and that is in the last analysis. All of us are monopolists at any rate, as refers to our homes, wives, and children. Perhaps this last statement only so far as it applies to us and collectivists, or socialists, or anarchists, as applied to others, and is not this sense of selfishness or envy at the root of all, or the greater part of this antitrust and anti-whatnot agitation. The Mexicans, for example, seem to be the original anti-monopolists or anti-special privilegists. For thus it not keep them being easy, chasing each other out of occupations, positions, and offices. The trouble all comes about by 2 or more persons trying to occupy the same space or position at the same time. In physics, this is considered an impossibility. In politics, everything is possible. Apparently, in the widest sense, a monopolist is any person who monopolizes a job to the exclusion of all others, and as all such persons are supposed to hold their position on merit, the monopolists are the efficient. This proposition holds true only in a free country, a country in which every man is unshackled and unbound, in which the rule of reason prevails over fetish of force or special privilege. And if a close observation is made of economic conditions prevailing in the United States today, it will be seen that generally speaking, it is the efficient and the men of merit who hold the responsible positions in the management of the corporations and trust, as well as in the smaller industrial activities. The great majority of the captains of industry, the doers, have risen from the ranks, or at least have proven their capacity to manage big business affairs. This must necessarily be so for a selfish reason, if no other, for the proprietors, the owners and directors of big businesses are forever endeavoring to declare large dividends, and to accomplish this they must employ the most efficient men and adopt the most efficient means available. To condense to a phrase, all monopoly may be defined as a reward for service or merit, whether it be conferred by patent rights, public utility, franchises, railroad rights of way, terminals, bank or corporation charters, land grants, ferry and power franchises, or by contract, public or private. And if, as some would contend, these men of ability are so numerous, why is it that so many cities are seeking the services of colonial Goethals, the builder of the Panama Canal? What then are some of the efficiency methods embodied in the so-called trusts and monopolies? That the creative of these methods is to be found in these organizations cannot be questioned. All men who do things have an ideal, a general plan of the work desired to be accomplished. This plan includes the thing to be done and the ways and means of accomplishing it. And this general plan or vision forms a not small part of the capitalization value of enterprise. The idea was elaborated under the chapter entitled The Entrepreneur. The consolidation of two or more business enterprises results in the attainment of economics in the conduct of the newly formed corporation, first by reducing the amount of capital required. This saving is embodied in efficiency method number 3, material saving. The consolidation also enables the management to reduce the working force. Efficiency method number 2, labor saving. It also eliminates waste or disease in operation by removing disastrous competition. Efficiency method number 12, external obstructions. This concentration of capital and machinery permits cheaper and more effective distribution and also the utilization of byproducts. Efficiency method number 7, and material augmenting. This centralization further permits of experimentation along the lines of improving the product. Number 14, manufacture of a better article. Neither will it be denied that this concentration of capital permits a wider promotion of the business, extension of home and foreign markets. Efficient method number 13, business augmentation. In an interview in the New York Sun, Mr. Charles R. Platt, referring to general industrial conditions in the fall of 1913, said, comparing the last 5 years with the 5 years preceding the industrial consolidations, we find that our exports of manufactured goods have increased nearly 6 times, namely to $6 billion, and it is a fortunate fact for us that of our total exports of manufactured goods, over 70% are supplied by individual consolidations. This is due not only to the fact that they can produce at a lower cost than can competing companies, but also to the fact that they have been able to organize departments for securing foreign orders, and in some cases, as in the case of the steel company, they are carrying stocks of goods in foreign markets in order to facilitate prompt delivery. It is the extension of markets into foreign countries that forms the most formidable task of entrepreneur of the 20th century. Competition is becoming keener with the advancing years. England, Germany, France, and other European as well as South American countries are strenuously contending for expanding markets for their products. Instead of hindering this great work, which confers benefits upon all citizens by reason of the balance of trade, the government should exercise all its powers to encourage our captains of industry in opening up new commercial fields. The entrepreneurs in building up foreign trade do not confine themselves to subjective methods of promotion altogether. In numerous instances, they have created demands for manufactured goods or other products among the citizens of other countries where no such demand existed. This was true of the Standard Oil Company when it first attempted to find a market for kerosene and byproducts in China and other countries. Then in other instances, our capitalists sometimes promote enterprises, railroads, trolley lines, etc. in foreign lands, and this way provide a market for our products. Some may contend that this last method represents an unsound economic principle that all of our surplus money should be invested at home. But it's not a fact that anything which increases the wealth of undeveloped foreign countries tends to promote commerce. Indirectly, this foreign investment benefits us because it increases production, and laborers employed in this production increase the sum total of the consumers of the world. Again, money used in educating and raising the standard of living of semi-civilized people ultimately creates wealth in various forms as represented in demands for products of civilization. How long, for example, would it take a manufacturer to get rich selling works of art, treatises on higher mathematics or spectroscopes to the inhabitants of Timbuktu, unless some effort to be made to educate them? As an example of what education can do subjectively to a people, we quote the following from a handbook of modern Japan showing the national development in the 30 years ending 1901. In 1872, the population was 32,210,000. In 1902, about 45 million, showing an increase slightly in excess of 33 and 1/3%. The trade during that period increased from 43,204,462 to 508,166,187, an increase of 1,000%. Foreign trade exports increased from 17 million to 26,647 to 252,300,000 49,542, a remarkable increase of 1,500%. Exports increased from 26,174,814 to 255,816,064, 644, nearly 1,000%. Yet there are those who say that education and brains are non-productive. What can be done to curb these so-called trusts or to minimize the evils incident to their organization and conduct? Much has been attempted along this line by various methods: publicity, regulatory, and penal, but none of these methods have proven altogether successful from an economic viewpoint. All attempts to regulate or dissolve trusts will prove more or less abortive for at least two reasons. First, for the reason that the industrial and commercial life of the nation and the world has become so big and complex that no commission can determine what should or should not be done under all circumstances. The railroads, as an example, are today on a standby if indeed they be not retrograding because of the restrictive legislation and regulative measures. Who are the omniscient ones that can tell these railroad promoters what to do under all conditions? Where is the man who can dictate to Harrisman or a hill and tell him where to establish his lines or to make his extensions? Then if the railroads are to be restricted in their profits to a certain percentage of earnings on their capitalization, who will build the new lines or make the necessary extensions and improvements? The second reason why trust legislation will prove more or less futile is that no law or book of laws can prevent captains of industry from secretly agreeing among themselves in the event that their corporations are dissolved by decrees of court to continue the operations as before, even though to all outward appearance the trusts have dissolved into their constituent companies. When all has been said, perhaps it will be discovered that the Supreme Court struck the keynote in the solution of the trust problem when it wrote the word reasonable into the Sherman Act. Reason must be exercised on both sides, by the public as well as the corporations. If free industrialism is to endure, if the trusts are not reasonable, they will bring down on their heads the vindictive wrath of an outraged public. And if the public is not reasonable, they will, by their activities, polarize the industrial animal which feeds us, sometimes with golden eggs. The answer to the trust problem, therefore, would seem to lie in the two words, publicity and reason. If all the essential facts are known and if the rule of reason is permitted to prevail, the great economic and social laws of supply and demand, of action and reaction, of reward and punishment will adjust themselves to the eye and ear of justice. For with Cicero, we must believe that Nutara Juris Fons. Physical valuation and watered stock. If, as we have endeavored to prove, land, labor, and capital do not produce all the wealth of the nation, a number of towering structures found upon the accepted theory of economics must totter and fall. Among these are the propagandas based upon physical valuation and watered stock theories, and all forms of socialism, syndicalism and single taxism. These latter doctrines will be treated under separate chapters. What would be the effect of the enforcement of physical valuation of corporate property as a basis for dividends? It will readily be agreed that after a careful perusal of the principles enunciated herein, the immediate effect will be both disastrous and unjust. It was shown in the chapters of the entrepreneur that the value of a projected enterprise does not lie in the amount expended in labor and material in its construction. What was the physical valuation of the strike of the rust and right of way of the Union Pacific when Harriman assumed control of the right of way without the rust of the Great Northern when James J. Hill financed it? And what is represented in the difference in value of the roads at the times specified and now, and who is hurt by the transactions? It was explained in that chapter how these men created wealth in all of the 15 efficient methods, and that in accomplishing this, they may not only harmed no one, but on the contrary, helped thousands, farmers, tradesmen, stockholders, in short, all who came within the magic circle of the economic activities. When the full potent of the value of mind or the idea as a source of wealth is recognized, the advocacy of physical valuation as a means to restrict profits will be considered a crime. If the greater part of the so-called water in a stock is really idealistic wealth, an effort to squeeze out the water would, in all probability, result in the strangulation of industry. It is clear the elimination of water would be equivalent to eliminating creative energy, with a resultant decline and decay of enterprise. It would be putting a premium on inefficiency if railroads were compelled to limit their earnings to a sum equal to a stipulated percent on the physical valuation of road. What does it matter whether the extra profits arising from creative energy are divided among the shareholders or as dividends or applied to the capital stock? What does it concern anyone? In other words, whether a given corporation declares dividends of 30% or a capitalization at its physical value, or dividends of 10%, or triple its valuation. In regard to the public service corporations, however, an attempt should be made to determine whether the rates are reasonable and just. Turning to industrial life, what is the physical valuation of Marshall Field and Company? What is the relative proportion between the sum invested and the annual earnings? What is the physical valuation of the E.C. Simmons Hardware Company of St. Louis, which does a yearly business of $20 million? Or what is the physical valuation of the Sears Roebuck Company, the Ford Motor Company, or the John Wanamaker Company? All of these companies and thousands of others have, of course, large amounts invested, but it's common knowledge that the dividends declared are enormously large. How can the rewards of efficiency be limited? In New Rochelle, NY, New York, there resides an aged man who is engaged in the manufacture of scales and balances. Some of these are used in analytical and essay work and are so delicately adjusted that a sensitiveness of 1 to 400ths of a milligram is obtained. A milligram is 1 hundredths part of a grain, which would mean that the balanced detect substances differing in weight to 1 to 400 thousandths part of a grain. That is, they will weigh a lead pencil mark. We do not know what the physical valuation of this plant, which occupies one small building, is, but we know that his profits are greater. The physical evaluation of the Edison Electric Company or the Westinghouse Company is great, but what is the physical valuation of the mind of an Edison or a Westinghouse, the original sources of all his wealth? Of course, it is recognized that the physical valuation theory is applied particularly to public utilities or quasi-public utilities, but do not the elements of creative wealth enter into this as largely as into an ordinary industrial enterprise. It cannot be denied that abuses have accompanied the conduct of many of these utilities, and there is no question that there should be a certain amount of governmental regulation. But how far should a city, state, or a nation go in this direction? Should they insist upon a strict physical valuation and limit the profits to a certain percent? We believe that these methods are both unwise and unjust. They might be adapted to particular situations to a certain degree in the conduct of public utility. For example, a strict railway, a number of issues must be considered. The public corporation has no right to declare dividends under a policy of total disregard for public convenience and comfort. The public has a right to demand adequate and satisfactory service. If it is found upon investigation that the management of public service corporation has put dividend paying above service, a halt shall be called by those in authority. It cannot be gainsaid that the conduct of a public utility corporation requires a high quality of mind. The men behind these corporations must possess all the qualities of successful entrepreneurs and must utilize all of the industrial efficiency methods available. We have in mind one such person, a president of Heat, Light, and Traction Company, who by close and intelligent application built up a discredited and losing plan to a magnificent and prosperous corporation. But in so doing, he wrecked his health. By working above 18 hours a day, he reduced the costs of utilities and made the stock pay big dividends, increased the value, if not the physical valuation of the plant at the expense of his own physical value. And after all has been said, any sort of big enterprise will not run of its own accord. It needs some strong, resourceful man at its head who will sacrifice all interests to the consummation of the work in hand. There is another very important phase of all propaganda looking to the governmental control or ownership of public utilities. We refer to the risks assumed. These risks include destructive forces of nature, fire, storms, floods, tornadoes, earthquakes, and also risks growing out of competition, labor disputes, and other human elements, including war. If everything is to be put on physical basis, who is to pay for all of these losses? It must be plain all those big allowances must be made for all these destructive elements. And instances of this sort of elemental destruction are occurring almost daily. As we write this, since writing this chapter, one of the greatest wars of all times has broken out in Europe. It is not our purpose to dwell on the manifold horrors of this conflict, but simply to call attention to the stupendous and widespread economic effect and how all the lesser efficient methods should rank when compared with the violation of the 15 efficiency method, the amelioration of economic environments. Values herefore considered unassailable have been riddled by imaginary and physiological bullets, counterfeits of the realities fired on the battlefield. But these economic bullets are no less real because of their invisibleness, invisibleness, or immateriality. Then it must be remembered that back of all is the moral equation character, the lack of which among the nations of the world has brought on this awful cataclysm, and how senseless is it all, even from an economic point of view. If it be the part of a wise government to encourage trade with other nations, it would appear a futile task to acquire their goodwill by the use of shell and rappel. If the war is for territorial aggrandizement, the nations which will lose, what will it profit then if they acquire a few square miles of territory, if thereby they lose the trade of the nations with whom they were at war, as well as others more or less sympathetic nations. Physical valuations. Report comes that floods have destroyed hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of property in Texas. It is not necessary to call attention to such great calamities as the Galveston flood in the San Francisco earthquake and the devastating floods in Ohio and the Central West in the early part of 1913. The Minnesota courts recently decided that a state can tax a railroad down to a certain profit. It follows that the more the management of the road can reduce expenses by efficiency methods, the more the state can tax it. This affords a splendid inducement for efficiency. If management of a public service corporation by clever advertising and methods of promotion attracts double the amount of traffic as his competitor, should he be deprived of the results of his efforts and ingenuity in watered stocks stands in the same relation to big businesses as goodwill does to small enterprises. Under the entrepreneur chapter, it was shown that goodwill is a compound of several factors in which the creative element of mind predominated. Why should a money value be placed on goodwill and withheld from watered stock? As the Japanese schoolboy would say, we ask to know. The law that water seeks its level applies to economics as well as to the hydraulics, and it follows that if there is too much water in a stock, the price level will fluctuate accordingly. Socialism, one of the strange, if not an accounted for phenomena of the time is the rapid growth of the principles of socialism throughout the world. That is, should be, despite the signal failure of all attempts to establish socialist colonies and states, is all the more remarkable. The press, newspapers, magazines, and books are freely discussing the propaganda in all of its phases, and in consequence, the miasmatic doctrine is threatening to submerge the world. Until recently, the socialists have been want to point to New Zealand as a shining example, successful and triumphant for cooperation methods. But of the late, disastrous reports have been received from the socialistic colony and hesitancy to point with pride to this country has been observed. There was published in Life in its issue of November 13, 1913, a letter from Mr. E.L. Gowran, who said in part, "It was our misfortune to visit New Zealand last winter, and we had an opportunity to learn something of the actual results of the advanced and progressive methods of government so widely advocated these days by lead pencil theorists, and we wish that those so anxious for all those socialistic theories may be obliged to go to New Zealand to live." The net results in New Zealand, as we saw them, were to place a complete embargo on all progress and rob individual of all incentive to put forth his best efforts. True has placed all on a level, but that level is of such a low order that the result is disastrous to the progress and well-being of the country as a whole. And the condition of the people is such as privileged elsewhere 50 years ago. In other words, New Zealand seems to be progressing backwards. We have visited tourists nearly every country in the world, and we never among a people supposed to be civilized, where living conditions were so crude, out of date, and comfortable generally for the tourists as we found them in New Zealand. And the people in general were the most crude, mediocre, and backwoods lot as regards labor conditions. After 20 years of government by the Labour Party and labor laws, there seems to be more strikes and labor troubles generally than we know anything about here. In New Zealand, as soon as a business becomes profitable and successful, the government claims it and takes it over, and thereafter the same business is conducted by government directly or is split up and sold to smallholders with little or no capital. The government furnishing the capital on long-term and very low interest. The prosperous, successful man is treated as an enemy to the society in general, and the sick, lame, and lazy are petted and nursed to the point where the successful man finds himself better off if he drops back in the line of march. Consequently, there is nothing doing. Socialism is not only contrary to all experience, but to all sound tenets of physiology and psychology as well. Since the Marxian doctrine that landed labor and capital produce all wealth has been proven false, socialism hasn't a leg to stand on. Self-reliance, freedom to aspire, to prosecute one's ideas and idols, distinguishes man from the brute. To destroy politics would be to convert him into idealist fish, or at best half animal and half man, and a system of government guaranteeing everyone the satisfaction of his desires and needs. Man's greatest friend, adversity, would be taken away from him. There's something higher and better than material prosperity. It would be a sad day when, by governmental interposition, all that makes for true success and nobility is destroyed in an effort to satisfy man's material wants. Secretary to the Treasury MC Ado, the man who built the Hudson River Tunnel, has this to say, and it's the elements contributing to success in life. I was brought up in Georgia in the path of General Sherman's famous March the Sea. As Henry Gladly once marked, General Sherman was a bit careless with the fires, and for this reason, among others, he has never been a popular man in Georgia. For myself, however, I feel that I owe General Sherman a debt of gratitude. He produced conditions and an environment which made it necessary for the individual to develop every resource and every power with which nature has endued him in order to exist. I believe that character is formed and developed in the highest degree of hardships, suffering, and poverty. I never doubted that whatever of character and capacity I have developed has been in a large measure due to the surroundings and conditions which General Sherman forced upon the people of my section during the war. The extract is from an article on Secretary MC Ado in Current Opinion of April 1913. A little further along says, the man that first discovered fire brought even the anger of the gods down upon him. The man that discovered the world was really round was thrown into prison, and the man that discovered that earth revolved around the sun had to recant or to be excommunicated. The declarations of Mr. MC Ado are refreshing, coming at a time when the world is a wreck with Nambe Pambe doctrines, socialists, semi-socialists, and anarchists, all of which are advocated by those who would make life easy for the average man. Socialism and socialists are the Irishman's plea. When you corner them at a point, they appear suddenly at another and most unexpected place. John Spargo's last book, The Substance of Socialism, might be termed the last stand of socialism, were it not that he still clings tenaciously to the worn-out doctrines of surplus value and exploitation of labor. When socialists defend themselves behind the bulwark of individualism, as he does in the treatise named The Fabric of Their Hoary Tenets is Becoming, in truth, Brent Tony says, collective ownership is not the ultimate fundamental condition of socialism. It is proposed only as a means to an end, not as an end itself. The central idea of socialism, its spirit, is the doctrine of the division of society into antagonistic classes. The producers of wealth are exploited by a class of capitalists, draining from the surplus value, and instinctively they struggle against the exploitation to reduce the amount of surplus value taken by capitalists to a minimum, ultimately to zero, to do away with exploitation, to destroy the power of one class, to live upon the labors of another class, is the socialist's aim. Social ownership and control are only proposed as a means of the attainment of the end. If other means toward that end, quicker, more efficient, or more certain means can be found. There's nothing in socialism to prevent their adoption. It follows, therefore, that to make collective property of things not used to exploit labor does not necessarily form part of socialists' program. It is easy to see that according to this principle of differentiation, it would be necessary to socialize the railroads, but not all necessary to socialize the wheelbarrow, neither will a small farmer be disturbed by him. It will be seen that this last stand is no stand at all, for the surplus value alleged to be derived from labor has been shown to be brain value, and exploitation is, in the sense of the author of the book under review, a mental chimera. Again, Spago says the equality of opportunity is the demand of socialists. Just what he means by equality of opportunity would be hard to explain, but if opportunity to labor to earn an honest living is this side ratum, then, as we have shown in this work, individualism with certain amendmentations is the answer. If socialists may have discarded the Marxian theory of wealth, still believe that wealth produced by certain kinds of brain workers should be appropriated by the state, the question may be asked, if one kind, why not all kinds of idealistic wealth? If there is to be a division into groups of various kinds of mental workers, with the entrepreneurs and other black sheep on one side and the white sheep on the other side, what shall be the basis of the division? Shall the author, inventor, actor, and artists be placed in the latter class, or shall the inventor be included in the group of wealth producers who shall be compelled to divide their earnings? Is not man's mind as much as his own and others? What would the hierarchy of socialism say to the man who claimed he could send messages without wires thousands of miles, or could transmute messages written or vocal across continent? Or what kind of a term or epithet would have been applied to Campbell when he announced the possibility of inventing a machine to pick cotton? Campbell's story of his trials and disappointments and final success after 20 years of experimentation to perfect the machine reads like romance. It was necessary to adjust the parts in such a manner that the fingers of the machine would collect the rip cotton without injuring the balls. This was accomplished by means of a complicated machinery by which the peculiarly jointed fingers would, in their delicate adjustment of stroke and movement, perform the work. The creation of wealth. Almost simultaneously with the announcement of this remarkable invention came the news from the south that an owner of a cotton plantation, by the means of intensive farming, had quadrupled the average yield per acre. Who calculated the benefits derived from these two discoveries when put into general use? One result will be cheapening of the cost of one of the most universally used of farm products, recognizing the truth of the adage that a penny or a million saved is equal to a like amount, and while the Marxian or old school economists may say which of the trilogy of land, labor, and capital saves or earns all of these millions in cotton. Now, under the socialistic or the paternal form of government, what would have happened? Would Campbell have been permitted to work 20 years on the cotton picking invention out of many millions, would he have been the one selected for this purpose? Even if under the guidance of those in power, such an invasion would have been deemed feasible. What a fine method this would afford to dodge work when the true laws of political economy are discovered. So great a thinker as J. Bernard Shaw will not fall into the bold error of saying social democracy would not be long saddled with the rents of ability which have during the past century made our born captains of industry our masters and tyrants instead of servants and leaders. It is conceivable that rent of managerial ability might in course of time become negative, as stunning as they may seem to many persons who are by this time so hopelessly confused amid existing anomalies that the proportion that whose over of you will be the chiefest shall be the servant of all strikes them as rather an utopian paradox than as the most obvious and inevitable of social arrangements. Fabian Essay in his socialism. Surely the idea of creative wealth is either absolutely unconceived or hopelessly confused amid existing anomalies. Think of it, the captains of industry who create opportunities to labor for millions, who lessen the cost of living and transform the world into a wonderland, accused of having their ability so to do saddled upon the people. Shall should take another shy at the Shylocks and try to get the horse in correct juxtaposition with the proverbial cat. To negative the ability of the captains of industry would mean the destruction of initiative, the root of all progress. Again, to the negative, the ability of these captains would not be desirable even if it were feasible. Nobody knows it all, and there is none so wise that someone else may not become wiser. Managerial ability and other forces of idealistic wealth must always be in demand, not only that the resources of a country may be fully developed and the highest economic returns be obtained, but, and this is more important, that a successful competition with other nations may obtain. It would not be desirable to curb or negative the ability of the entrepreneur or the creative man for another reason. It is due to every man that he be permitted to develop his talent to the highest. It matters little what the economic effect may be. It matters much whether he be allowed to develop his powers in order to become a fully grown man. But there are ways in which a government can aid the people in their economic struggles, even though governmental control is not expedient. Many advocate the municipal, state, or national ownership of public utilities. But in addition to the objectionable features cited above, there are other reasons why this doctrine should not prevail. First, there is the delay on agreeing on the proper thing to do, and second, there is temptation to select employees by political preferment or personal friendliness rather than on strict merit. Economic progress would be hampered at every turn where there is so much to be done, and in view of the fact that so much of what is accomplished under individualism seems impracticable at first blush, it is evident that if things were left to a vote of a bureau, committee, or other central authority, much that should have been done would be left undone. An excellent example of this may be readily recalled, namely the delay of years in the development of coal and other mineral and agricultural lands in Alaska, there has been such a divergence of views as to the best methods of development between those in high and low authority, between the masses of people and the newspapers, and the coal has been left in the ground. While industries of the Pacific coast languished and were forced to pay an exorbitant price for the fundamental base of all progress, the black diamond, and what some of the legitimate ways in which a government can aid its clients, allies, the people. It may be truthfully remarked that the various state and local governments build better than they knew when they laid the foundations for economic development in establishing public schools. When the public school system were first established, it was the objective of safeguarding and preserving the public without special reference to individual benefits or general industrial enhancement. It was purposed to educate the children in the first principles in order that they might, upon the attainment of their majority, exercise the electoral franchise more intelligently. Since that time, there has been an undeviating trend toward the enlargement of the curriculum until in late years industrial and vocational training has been introduced, and each succeeding year has seen the expansion to more individualistic courses of study. Likewise, the national government, through its various departments, is gradually adopting a more fraternal system of administration in educative matters. The government of agriculture, as an illustration, is in 1,000 ways teaching farmers how to till the soil and rear stock in a more efficient and productive manner. The National Congress and various state legislatures have also placed many laws on the statute books looking to the amelioration of the condition of the working class, but the highest good from this source can not be expected until a correct economic basis has been adopted. There is a limit, however, to this governmental supervision, and it is far from socialism. The function of the government is not to direct citizens in their economic struggles, neither is it safe nor sent to guarantee livelihood to all, regardless of circumstances and conditions. Anything which weakens the initiative, destroys the will or personality, undermines the character of an individual, or makes him less a man, is painful and pernicious. The socialists and other agitators who claim opportunities for labor are becoming less with the advancing years do not seem to utilize the opportunities expand in proportion to the increase in population and the general educational and economical progress. What a farce to cry! The door of opportunity is closed when heaven and earth stand ready to shower riches, material and immaterial, upon those who qualify themselves to receive. Did any of the great men and women sit down and bewail the lack of opportunity? Did Franklin or Washington, Lincoln or Watts or Florence Nightingale or Jean Lind or Jane Addams or any of the captains of industry or the inventors or the professional men who, through self-control and self-culture, raised himself above his fellow man? Did Helen Keller bemoan the lack of opportunity when she found herself in a world of darkness and silence? The answer is the world of light, of beauty, of speech and song, which she had called to her side from the invisible universe of unexplored worlds. Now altogether, do not hear the Avail chorus, but Helen Keller is a socialist. What have you got to say to that? Well, if you had started with the handcuffs of Miss Keller, you would be entitled to be a socialist or anything else consistent with high purpose and endeavor. We ought to recognize the fact that there are two aspects of socialism, one emanating from the heart and the other from the head. It is to be hoped that we are all heart socialists, that we possess the elements of pity and have a burning desire to help others in all ways compatible with experience and reason, but we may honestly differ as to methods. Some of us believe that the strongest characters are formed in a struggle against the tide, while others tend a helping hand under all circumstances, cuddle the cuddling child. But there comes a time when the chronic cradle song must give way to the Marshallese. The story of Helen Keller's achievement of the impossible should restore in our hearts the renascent twins of infinite hope and infinite courage. The arguments against socialism apply equally as strong against the doctrinal blights of syndicalism and the industrial workers of the world. If land, labor, and capital are not only the productive forces, the fangs of their sinuous and mysterious shibboleths are removed, these scourges of progress blatantly announce that labor, as far as the human element is concerned, produces all wealth and therefore entitled to all profits. The textbooks on economics, with John Stuart Mill as their god and guide, have no adequate answer to this cry, which is the basis of all socialistic creeds and creeds. Single tax. Among the numerous aims which are coming to the surface with renewed life, in the general swirl and evolution of economic agitation is that of single tax. The doctrine of single tax was first promulgated by the physiocrats and later rejuvenated by Henry George in The Progress and Poverty. The latter advocated the abolition of all taxes upon industry and products of industry, and the taking but taxation upon land values of the annual rental value, which is now rendered to private ownership. Mr. George advanced a number of arguments in favor of his theory, but the single taxes of the present day confine themselves principally to the proposition that economic rent is created by the community, and that it cannot therefore be appropriated by the owner. This is the doctrine of the unearned increment, and the recent agitation has urged the gradual appropriation by the state either of all the future unearned increment of land or of a larger share of this future unearned increment than is taken at the present time in taxes. It is also contended that the placing on land of all the tax will force the development of vacant and unused property. What is the unearned increment, so-called? How is it created? As a general proposition, it may be said that it has its origin in the same manner as all dynamic wealth. It is created by men of enterprise. The fact that the unearned increment must be considered as the product of economic forces, the greatest of which is intellect, just as the material progress of the world is the product of such forces. If we are to appropriate the rent on land thus increased in value, why not appropriate all of the industrial opportunities created by agistic and dynamic wealth producing forces? For example, the industrial life of today creates positions for all sorts of experts and brain workers. It would be just reasonable to require these experts and mental workers who are thus benefited by economic environments to divide their salaries with the public as it is to ask the beneficiaries of the unearned increment to divide with the improvident. Man be he beggar, proletariat, aristocrat, plutocrat, or whatnot, is a debtor to society in numberless ways and is the beneficiary of all the creative and the dynamic wealth which has transformed the world into the marvelous state of advancement of today. These benefits are showered upon him from the time of his birth until the solemn day in which he closes his eyes on unearthly timings. The sciences of chemistry, medicine, bacteriology, and philanthropies have taught the mother how to ward off many of the most destructive of infertile ills, and it is not altogether improbable that the reader owes his life to one or more of these discoveries, which have also saved lives and ameliorated the condition of numberless of others. Society then takes the child and teaches it the elements of useful knowledge by means of kindergartens and public schools, and the education thus acquired not only enables the child to better fight life battles, but also to absorb a competitor and fuller enjoyment of the world's good. The schools are supplemented by the public libraries and other educative forces, and after the child has reached maturity, his life is made smoother and pleasanter by the presence of numerous applied arts and sciences. He can travel place to place by water, rail, or airship. To be strictly up to date, he can purchase the news of the day and magazines for a nominal sum. The Nickelodeon or moving pictures have supplemented the theaters, and in most large cities, free concerts are held in the parks and public places. The introduction of the sciences and inventions in manufacturers have cheapened products and brought them within the reach of all who are willing to work for them. An increment indeed, who are the recipients of the unbought but real wealth of the world. To name them is to name all who live in this marvelous 20th century. The passenger who pays his way, and hobo who begs or steals a ride on a transcontinental train, the former to enjoy the scenic wonders, the latter to seek employment, are alike obtaining the benefits of the unearned increment. Some go to Europe and the other lands of the East, while others have this places brought to them in pictorial panoramas. The man of millions and the man working in the teach are receiving the unearned increment when they purchase a paper or periodic or a book for a sum which hardly pays for the paper used in their manufacture. Okay, wait. Anybody? I have 8 minutes to go. Let's see. The wage earner, the farmer, and all manual laborers are enriched by and benefited by labor-saving devices which relieve them of the drudgery of hardest forms of labor permits the reduction of working hours, and in case of the farmer, increase the profits of soil culture. The professional men and mental laborers of all kinds are beneficiaries of the earned increment by the operation of new fields of labor attendant with the exercise of man's ingenuity and creativeness. The emancipation of woman has come through the marvelous inventions. The old say man works from sun to sun, but woman's work is never done. Is no longer true. Household necessities are now purchased by the housewife at prices that would astonish their grandmothers. The sewing machine partly emancipated their mothers, but now readily made clothing can be had so reasonable that the sewing machine has in a great measure been thrown into the discard. And now comes the fireless cooker, which allows the household goodies to prepare 3 meals at once. The rule of the unearned increment, if there be such, applies principally to the small property holders, those who have purchased small tracts of land near a growing city and held it for an increase. The men of capital, real estate dealers, and others who purchase such land in large quantities are as a rule engaged in enterprise which form a big factor in the enhancement of their own as well as surrounding property. It holds a position analogous to that of the railroad builder and the manufacturer, who by developing new fields of labor benefit the many. Then the taxes on the land, then advertising and other expenses incident to its increment by the process of the earned increment, and in most cases go a long way towards counterbalancing any gain. There is for that reason a big element of risk, as the argument that the application of the theory of the single tax would compel owners to improve their property. It may be said that the opposite side effect has been experienced at places where it has been tried, which upon consideration will be seen to be the logical result. In Vancouver, BC, it has been found that the large property owners and capitalists take advantage of the exemption of the taxes on improvements, and instead of developing several pieces of property are in the habit of erecting skyscrapers on single pieces. It should be apparent to all that it is impossible and expedient to force development, for all segments of progress comes by slow processes which must take into account 1,000 factors in economic life. To sum up in a sentence, the same criticism applies to the teachings of single taxism as to all other restrictive social doctrines. It tends to destroy the initiative and the creative force in man, and is therefore hurtful to all true progress. And with the other socialist dogmas considered, it appears to be a deliberate attempt to appropriate the earnings of enterprise without assuming any of its risks. Conservation is not within the province of a work of this kind to treat exhaustively the conservation of natural resources. The proposition that such resources, timber and mineral lands, waters from irrigation, navigation and power, fish and game and great scenic section should be conserved needs no argument. The reclamation of wasteland, whether by methods of irrigation, drainage, or reforestation, or prevention of soil erosion, comprises a stupendous constructive work for the national and state government. The undue waste of natural waste should be prevented without question, but the constructive phase of conservation has been in a hopeless tangle for many years, it is all right to outline a policy for the prevention of waste, but keeping step with this movement, there should be an intelligent plan formulated by those in authority to encourage a rational development of resources. All are familiar with the bitter controversies that have been raging for years between conservationists and anti-conservationists, between advocates of the same measure of development and those of another variety, and between the national and state of partisans. The general result of all the agitation, as it appears date, is nil, or practically such. It is our intention to point out one or two fundamental propositions which may help to solve these problems. If our contention that all industrial development is due to creative forces or means of initiative and enterprise, it follows that the tools of industrialism should be made accessible and free as possible. Some of these tools are to be found in the natural products, coal, iron, oil, gas, and water courses. Shall these fundamental implements be taxed, or shall they be made as free as other needful and invigorative forces of nature? Air, sunshine, and rain. How sordid and unimaginative is the mind that cannot see in the coal, the bustling factories, the thriving cities, and the great arteries of commerce, rivers, rails, and lakes black with courage, laden with wealth. Many citizens of US have recently become obsessed with an impulse to conserve all kinds of natural resources, apparently without a thought of natural consequences. They have advocated the public ownership or control of mineral and coal lands without regard to the lessons of experience of the attainment cost of prospecting, mining, and distributing coal, particularly in Alaska, whose benign climate eliminates all necessity for fuel, has been the subject of bitter and interminable. The many who have gone mad on the conservation of coal or government leasing of coal lands do not seem to realize that this mineral is the prime element entering into all manufactures, arts, and industrial pursuits. It's like telling the farmer to till the soil without tools, or the teacher to instruct his pupils without first acquiring the rudiments of knowledge. These politicians and agitators have practically declaimed against turning over coal land to the only class of people able to develop it, in order that the government may collect a few cents royalty per ton, when it is considered that the consumption of a small quantity of coal may be given employment to many otherwise idle persons, or that it may be the means of making some discovery in the science or arts which may prove of unestimable value. The short-sighted policy of this variety of conservationists is apparent, estimating the population of the greater US at 100 million and allowing the government 10 cents per ton royalty on coal mined on federal property for every 100 million tons of coal mined. Each individual share would be 10 cents. When it is realized that the reduction in taxes would be the greatest to those who pay the largest amount of taxes, that savings to the average man would be less than the sum named. Again, if a royalty is charged on government coal, the lessee will simply add an equivalent amount to the sale price, which is the tantamount to taxing industries. If the government is justified in placing a protective tariff on goods for the benefit of labor and manufacturers, it is more justified in permitting the free use of coal for the same purpose. The American people are not logical at all times. They recognize the benefits of tariffs for manufactured articles and a low tariff or free trade for raw materials, but in the case of raw list of raw materials, that of coal, is proposed to tax it while still in the depths of the earth. They pause to lease the coal lands in such small tracts as to prohibit the development in satisfactory or economical manner. The same strictures apply to the never-ending merry-go-around discussion over water power grants. If these prime factors in economic life must be taxed in the name of all that is reasonable, tax them at once in order that the wheels of progress may again begin to move. Of course, there is only one thing worse than taxing the tools of industry, and that is the taking of them or keeping of them from the workers of the world. Would not a rational solution of conservation problem as regards development be for the government, rational or state, for employ engineers of wide experience and vision to make surveys of the natural sources and recommend such actions as they deem wise? In other words, place the difficult problems in the hands of experts, such removing them from all forms of agitation and political demagogism. There may, and no doubt will, come a time in the not distant future when other means and methods will be devised for creating power, when the perfection of electrical transmission of energy power can be generated at central points and considered factories hundreds of miles away, then also the sea and the sun will be made to give forth their hidden energies. And even now, the story comes from Philadelphia of the successful invention of a sun motor. It is those who have no imagination or faith in the genius of man, who are loudest in their cry for conservation of anything and everything in heaven and earth, while the stolid conservationist is lying awake nights worrying about what the world will do for this and that 1,000 years hence. Masoni will his head in the clouds find a way to eliminate material altogether. Former Secretary of the Interior Walter L. Fisher, in an address delivered at a meeting of National Fire Protective Association in May 1911 on fire, waste and remedies, said, among other things, the national government is trying to reduce loss by requiring fireproof material in the construction of its buildings. Government statistics show that the annual fire loss is one of half the value of the new buildings erected each year, a tax amounting to 2.51 on every man I think we are done. We are done. We are done. Let's finish up this page and we call it. On every man, woman, and child in the States is being paid in the annual fire loss of the nation upon its buildings and their contents alone. The U.S. government is the owner of the building, costing more than $300 million and is spending each year more than $20 million in new buildings. It is the policy of the government not to insure its buildings against the loss by fire, but to reduce its risks by fire. It's also its policy to minimize the possibility of forest fires by effective regulations, despite the incongruity existence between the first and second paragraphs. His remarks contain much food for thought. His inconsistency lies in advocating the erection of fireproof buildings to save insurance, while at the same time citing the policy of government in conserving and preserving forests. Lumber, the most inflammable of all materials,